You know, it was actually Frank came up to me and mentioned I think it was spring or summer, about how the boys have been skateboarding in the neighborhood and they're out looking for places to skate. And people were coming up to them and saying, no, you can't do that here, you know, and they were over at, I think, the school, and then people called the police, and the police came by and politely said, you have to go somewhere else. And so it started to dawn upon us that here's an activity that kids really were enjoying. It was becoming popular with a kind of a younger crowd, but there were no real places for the kids to go practice this activity.
Todd and I, as parents of skateboard kids, really had no idea, you know, at all how to build a skate park or what the features and needs really even were. And just by luck, we met this fellow, Chris, who was full of energy and full of ideas. And you know, Todd and I saw it as an opportunity to be able to kind of step back and turn that portion of the project over to Chris and let him come up with a design and figure out how to build it, and allowed Todd and I to kind of handle more of the financial and the public support aspects, and a little more behind the scenes is the role that we took at that point.
I traveled for years. I always sort of was in other people's skate scenes, and wherever I would travel in a new town, I would sort of just skate whatever was available, and I always told myself, you know, having gone through some scenes where there'd be all kinds of cool stuff to skate and other scenes that were neglected, that when I finally settled down and lived somewhere, I was going to help somehow do something for whatever scene I ended out in. So when I moved to Seattle, I was already sort of primed to do that, and then I read this newspaper article that said, if you build it, they will come, and it was this article about the North Seattle street skaters who were planning on building this skate park in Ballard, and it was about Frank Shields and Todd Dickens and their kids. And so I had to, there was no contact info, so I had to call the newspaper. It was this little like Ballard newspaper of some kind, and talked to the guy who wrote the article anyway, found their phone numbers that way, and went out and met them in Ballard and told them I wanted to help them, and they were just like, you know, they were like, cool.
This process, this thing started coming together. The kids came together and formed a group called the North Seattle Street Skaters, and they pulled their friends together and became involved in going to businesses and trying to get donations and going to these community center meetings and promoting the whole idea of this park. And that's how things got started.
Our original site was at Golden Gardens. We were going to have the skate park there, and we did a lot of fundraising and approached all sorts of local businesses to help, and had all this support and all this money raised and volunteers ready to go. And then it was like 2 weeks before we were going to break ground, the Parks Department came out and told us we couldn't have the site anymore, that we had to get a new site. And I was like, you know, I've got all these donors, I've got all this materials, I've got all these volunteers, well, you better get me another site right away.
There was this vacant lot that the city had just purchased for $7 million, and sitting fenced in, and the skaters said, why can't we just put our ramps here? And
so then they found this site in Ballard, that's where the park ended out, and they, you know, it was this old Safeway, I think is what it was, and old Safeway parking lot that was slated for demolition in a couple of years' time, and said, well, how about you put the park here? And I was like, well, this location sucks, although it didn't, it was a good location. I was like, but we'll take it as long as we can have a bowl.
And I think it's basically, we have to give credit to Chris for this, because he had talked to the grind line people about the possibility of a bowl and what role they might be able to play and how much they could step forward and donate some of their services and time to make this happen. And he was able to pull these different groups together and talk to grind line and get us to a point where for a reasonable amount, grind line would be willing to donate services and materials as long as we could provide some and match them to a certain extent to go ahead and design and build the bowl.
From the very simple drawings that Chris drew in the beginning, we were able to show them to the Parks Department, and they kind of bought off on the idea, not realizing how serious we were about building a bowl. And I think that once the process started and we started the excavation process for building a bowl, soon Parks Department realized that there was nothing in place. They hadn't gone through their normal process. There was no engineering, there was no architectural drawings. None of their entities within the park system had really been consulted. Basically what happened was Margaret Anthony said, go ahead and build it. We're understanding it's a temporary site. And by the time, I'm in the excavation business, and by the time I got in and dug the hole and had created this cavity for the bowl, the Parks Department started freaking out.
What had happened was that, again, the skaters had said, you know, actually we'd really like to have a bowl, not just these skate ramps. And we have this, actually 2 companies that have come forward to do our match for us, to do some in-kind donations of materials. And this was Grindline and Dreamland. Mm-hmm. And they said, here's some match, you know, can we have $15,000 from the neighborhood matching fund? And the matching fund said, sure, here's your money. And the skaters were so excited that a parent of who was also giving some in-kind labor, who owns a backhoe company, mm-hmm. went right out to the site and he dug a hole. Now, one does not dig holes in the city. He hit a water main immediately. Big mess.
We were not able to get any kind of as-built information on the Safeway structure as far as where the storm sewer ran, and consequently the ground was glacial till. It was very hard earth where the bowls created. I was digging at night actually, and very little light, and I dug right through the storm sewer and the sewer line and didn't even realize it. The ground was so hard it was like it was cast in concrete. And it wasn't until I got out of the machine and got down in the ditch and looked that there were these 4 perfect cement holes on each side of the ditch.
One day Frank Shields went down there with his earth moving equipment and just broke a big hole in the ground, and we just started doing it. And for a few weeks the Parks Department didn't notice what was going on, and then they realized that the skate park was taking shape, so they came in and they were like, you gotta stop, and they ended up actually putting a chain link fence around the whole site and closed it down. And so then the Stranger newspaper wrote a little piece on it, on how the Ballard Bowl was getting stopped because the Seattle Parks Department was afraid of what was going on, and it really made the Parks Department look pretty bad. So all of a sudden the next week the Parks Department changed their tune entirely, and they were supportive of the project and wanted to help us, and so we just got it started again. And that sort of thing happened countless times throughout the whole process before it was finally done, with the city just telling us to stop working and us just keeping on. We just kept doing it anyway.
So after we got the water main area fixed up, you know, people were kind of pulling their hair out in our department, and we said, just get it built. You know, we know it's going to be temporary, and there was a contract signed between the skaters and the Parks Department that says, you know, we're here temporarily, you know, but we really want our bowl. And I mean, everybody understood it was a temporary bowl that was going in, and so the Parks Department said, okay, just get it in. You know, I think it was the thought of, you know, people with backhoes and breaking water lines and everything, that, I mean, I think people just kind of just washed their hands of it and just sort of said, just build it, just do it. Now, I mean, I think, you know, in retrospect, if we had thought through it more carefully as a department, we would have said, build it 20 feet away from the property line rather than butt up against the property line, and build it in the ground, you know, call Dial-A-Dig, find out where the utility lines are, and then find out where you can carve it into the ground, not 5 feet above the ground.
The bowl was built on Sundays, Sunday afternoons for about 9 months by a bunch of volunteers. A bunch of skaters just came together, and at the time the street course was already done, so we would go work and dig by hand the bowl or do whatever we were doing, and there'd be skaters in the street course, and I'd just keep yelling at them to come help us, and so I recruited lots of people off the street course.
I got roped in at the shovel for about, I don't know, a day, 6, 7 hours. Then I just knew not to show up for a while until I heard that it was ready to go. We were like backfilling all this we're standing on. Nick Hubbard was putting on the coping, so, I like foreman rolls. I don't like to shovel work and stuff.
It was close enough to where the grind line, Dreamland guys could come in, and we called them and had them come in, and they worked. They volunteered 3 or 4 days of their time, and then they were paid for 2 days of doing Shot Creek work to put it in.